Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. Can you really get fined $500 for calling the police on a vegetable garden? That's the question my power-hungry HOA president had to find out the hard way. For months, she waged a ridiculous war against my backyard project, a war she was determined to win. But her obsession led her to make one very public, very illegal mistake. And I have the entire thing on video. I've lived in my house for about 8 years. It's nothing fancy, just a regular 3-bedroom in what used to be a quiet neighborhood where people mostly kept to themselves. When I bought the place, there was no HOA. That was actually one of the selling points for me. I'd rented in an HOA community before and hated every minute of it. Things changed about 3 years ago. A bunch of new houses went up on the undeveloped lots at the end of our street, and the people who bought them were really into the whole community standards thing. Within a year of moving in, they'd organized an HOA. They went around with clipboards getting signatures, promising it would protect property values and keep the neighborhood looking nice. I didn't sign. Neither did a lot of the people who'd been here longer. Our houses predated any HOA agreements, so legally we couldn't be forced to join. But that didn't stop them from trying to act like their rules applied to everyone. The woman who became HOA president lived 4 doors down. I'd talked to her a few times when she first moved in, just the usual neighbor small talk. She seemed fine at first, maybe a little intense about her lawn, but nothing too weird. Once the HOA formed and she got elected president, though, something changed. She started treating the whole neighborhood like it was her personal kingdom. For the first year or so after the HOA started up, they mostly left non-members alone. I'd hear from people who'd joined about violation notices they were getting. Stuff about their mailbox color being wrong or their grass being a 1/4 inch too long. It seemed exhausting, but it wasn't my problem. Then things started creeping in our direction. I'd find printed notes stuck in my door about how my hedges could be trimmed more neatly, or how I should consider repainting my shutters to match the approved color palette. The notes weren't official HOA violations since I wasn't a member, but they were clearly meant to pressure me into compliance anyway. I ignored them. So did most of the other non-members. This seemed to really bother the HOA president. I'd see her walking past my house more often, always looking at things with this pinched, disapproving expression. I got into vegetable gardening about 6 years ago, started small with just a few tomato plants in pots, then expanded to a small raised bed in the corner of my backyard. Nothing visible from the street, just something I did because I liked having fresh vegetables and it gave me something to do on weekends besides watch TV. Last spring I decided to expand the garden. I'd been reading about different growing techniques and wanted to try some new things. My backyard was decent sized, but mostly just grass I had to mow, so converting part of it to garden space seemed like a better use. Over a couple weekends, I built 3 more raised beds out of cedar lumber, put down some cardboard and mulch for pathways between them, planted a bunch of different vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, beans, lettuce, added some herbs. Put in a few blueberry bushes along the back fence. Nothing crazy, probably took up about 1/3 of my backyard when it was done. I thought it looked good, neat and organized, way better than the patchy grass that had been there before. My neighbors on either side came over to check it out and both said it looked nice. One of them asked for advice on building raised beds for his own yard. About a week after I finished setting everything up, the HOA president showed up at my back gate. I was out there watering and didn't hear her walk up. She startled me by clearing her throat loudly. "That's quite the project you've got going," she said. Her tone made it clear this wasn't a compliment. I turned off the hose. "Yeah, decided to expand my vegetable garden." "How much did this expansion cost you?" She was looking at the beds with this calculating expression. "I don't know. Few $100s maybe. Why?" "Just wondering if you got the proper permits for all these structures." I stared at her. "They're garden beds. They don't need permits." "Any structure on your property over a certain value requires a permit. That's county code. These are temporary garden beds made of untreated lumber sitting on top of the ground. They're not permanent structures." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. "We'll see about that. I'm also going to need to report this to the HOA board. Gardens over a certain size need approval. I'm not in the HOA. The covenants apply to the whole neighborhood, member or not." This was news to me. "No, they don't. I checked my deed when you guys formed the HOA. There are some basic restrictions from when the neighborhood was first built, but nothing about gardens." Her jaw tightened. "I'll be looking into this. If you're in violation, you'll need to remove all of this." She left before I could respond. I went inside feeling annoyed, but not particularly worried. I knew my property rights. The HOA didn't have authority over non-members, and even if they did, a backyard vegetable garden wasn't violating anything. A few days later, a guy from county code enforcement showed up. He said someone had filed a complaint about unpermitted structures. He seemed kind of embarrassed about it, like he knew it was a waste of time, but had to follow up anyway. I showed him the garden. He walked around, looked at the raised beds, poked at one with his boot, then pulled out his phone and looked something up. "Yeah, these are fine," he said. "Under 18 inches tall, temporary construction, not anchored to the ground. They don't require permits. Someone gave you bad information. So I'm good?" "You're good. I'll make a note that the property was inspected and no violations were found. That should stop any more complaints about this." After he left, I was pretty sure I knew who'd filed the complaint. It seemed like a petty thing to do, but whatever. If the HOA president wanted to waste county resources, that was her problem. The next week, I got a letter on HOA letterhead. It informed me that my unauthorized agricultural operation violated neighborhood covenants, and I had 30 days to remove the garden and restore my yard to approved landscaping standards. I called the number on the letter. The HOA president answered. The conversation didn't go well. She insisted the covenants applied to me. I insisted they didn't. She threatened fines. I pointed out she had no legal authority to fine me. She said they'd take me to court. I said go ahead. We went in circles for about 5 minutes before I gave up and hung up. I wasn't too worried about the legal threats. I'd looked into this when the HOA first formed and knew they didn't have standing, but I decided to cover my bases anyway. I made an appointment with a real estate attorney and brought all my documents. The attorney looked everything over and confirmed what I already knew. They can send you all the letters they want, but they can't enforce anything. You're not bound by their covenants. If they try to fine you or file a lien, it won't hold up. So I just ignore them? Pretty much. Keep copies of everything they send you just in case, but don't worry about it. They're bluffing. So I ignored them. Spring turned into summer. My garden did pretty well. I got a decent tomato harvest. The peppers were producing. The blueberries were still small but healthy. It was satisfying work, seeing things grow. The HOA president seemed to take my garden as a personal insult. She'd walk past my house multiple times a day. Sometimes she'd stop and stare at my backyard for a while before moving on. It was weird, but I tried not to let it bother me. Then the bogus complaints started. First, the health department showed up because someone reported illegal composting. I had a small compost bin in the corner of my yard, completely legal and properly maintained. The inspector checked it out, said it was fine, and left. A week later, animal control came by. Someone had reported I was keeping chickens illegally. I wasn't keeping chickens. The officer seemed confused about why he'd been called. Then the fire marshal showed up about hazardous materials storage. That one really baffled him when he found out it was a false alarm. Each time the complaint was anonymous, but it wasn't hard to figure out who was behind it. After the 4th or 5th visit from various county departments, I was getting frustrated, not just with the HOA president, but with the fact that county resources were being wasted on this nonsense. One of the code enforcement guys who came out actually said something about it. Look, whoever keeps calling us in is wasting everyone's time. If this continues, we can cite them for false reports, but we'd need to know who's doing it. That's when I decided to install security cameras. Nothing fancy, just a couple of outdoor cameras from the hardware store that connected to my phone. One covering my backyard, one covering the front. They had motion detection and could record audio if someone was close enough. I figured at minimum I'd have evidence of who was trespassing if anyone decided to mess with my garden directly. What I didn't expect was what I'd catch on camera a few days later. I was inside working when I got a motion alert on my phone. I checked the camera feed and saw the HOA president standing on the sidewalk in front of my house with 2 other people I recognized as HOA board members. They were looking at my backyard and talking. I turned up the volume. The audio was decent enough to make out what they were saying. Completely out of hand. It looks terrible from the street. One of the other people said something I couldn't quite hear. Then the HOA president responded, "The county won't do anything. I've tried multiple times. They keep saying everything's fine." More mumbling from the others then, "Well, what about the police? Can we call them?" "I already tried that. They said it's not a police matter." They talked for another minute, then the HOA president pulled out her phone. "I'm calling again. Maybe if enough complaints come in, someone will actually do something." One of the others said something that sounded like, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" But the HOA president was already dialing. I watched on my phone as she made the call. She told whoever answered that there was an illegal farming operation in a residential neighborhood and she needed police to come immediately. The person on the other end must have asked her something because she said, "Yes, it's an emergency. This is destroying our property values." There was a pause, then she got more agitated. I've called code enforcement and they won't do anything. I need someone to enforce the law. Another pause. Her face was getting red. Fine, send someone. She hung up and said to the others, "They're sending a unit." They stood around for another few minutes, then a police car pulled up. 2 officers got out. The HOA president immediately started talking to them, gesturing at my house. I saved the video to my phone and went outside. The officers were letting the HOA president talk, both of them with these patient but tired expressions. When I walked up, one of them held up a hand to stop her mid-sentence. "Ma'am, we've been here before about this. There's no violation. But the garden. A garden isn't illegal, we've explained this." "Then why won't anyone do anything?" The other officer said something about HOA matters being civil issues, not police matters. The HOA president was getting more worked up, saying they were refusing to do their jobs. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me, officers, I think I have something relevant." The HOA president spun around. "This is between me and the police." I ignored her and pulled out my phone. "I have security cameras, I recorded what just happened." I showed them the video. Both officers watched, their expressions getting more serious. When it finished, one of them looked at the HOA president. "Ma'am, I need to see your ID." "What? Why?" "You just called emergency services for something you knew wasn't an emergency. That's misuse of emergency lines. I have every right to call when someone's breaking the law. But no law is being broken, and you know that. We've told you that before." The HOA president started arguing, saying the video was illegal, that I couldn't record her without permission. The officer shook his head and explained that I could absolutely record video on my own property, and she was on a public sidewalk anyway. The other officer was already writing in his citation book. He asked for her license again. She handed it over, fuming. "You're being cited for misuse of emergency services," he said, handing her a ticket. "The fine is $500. You can pay or contest it in court, but I'm warning you now. If you call emergency services again for this, the fines will increase and you could face criminal charges." After they left, the HOA president stood there staring at the ticket. The other 2 board members had disappeared at some point during the confrontation. She looked at me with pure anger. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is." She stormed off. I went back inside, feeling a weird mix of satisfaction and unease. I'd wanted her to face consequences for the harassment, but I hadn't expected it to happen quite like that. Word got around the neighborhood pretty fast. A couple of non-HOA members stopped by to tell me they'd had similar problems with the HOA president, and were glad someone had finally stood up to her. One of the HOA members came by and apologized, saying they hadn't known things had gotten so out of hand. The HOA president tried to keep fighting. She sent me another certified letter demanding I appear before the HOA board. I wrote "not a member refused" on it and sent it back unopened. According to one of my neighbors who was in the HOA, she also tried to get the board to approve spending HOA funds on a lawyer to sue me. That vote failed badly. Most members didn't want their dues wasted on a lawsuit over someone's vegetable garden. The harassment stopped after that. No more bogus complaints to the county, no more threatening letters. The HOA president stopped walking past my house every day. Then a few months later, there was apparently a big blow-up at an HOA meeting. I wasn't there, but multiple neighbors told me about it afterward. A bunch of members had shown up specifically to call for the president's removal. They were tired of the drama, the wasted money, and the fact that she'd made the whole HOA look ridiculous by getting cited by the police. There was a vote. She lost badly and was removed from the board. The new president came by a week later to apologize for everything that had happened. He seemed reasonable, said they were implementing new policies to prevent board members from harassing non-members. We ended up talking about gardening for a while. He was thinking about putting in some raised beds himself. The old HOA president put her house up for sale about a month after she was removed from the board. According to neighborhood gossip, she was furious about the whole thing and refused to live somewhere that did not appreciate proper leadership. She moved out before winter. As for the ticket, I heard she tried to fight it in court and lost. By the time the fine and court costs were added together, it cost her around $750. All because she called emergency services over tomatoes. My garden is still there. It has been almost 3 years since I expanded it. Some things grow great, some things fail every season. I can grow tomatoes and peppers without much trouble, but apparently carrots and I have a personal disagreement. It is not some perfect social media garden. It is just a normal backyard vegetable plot. Raised beds, mulch paths, herbs, blueberries, a few plants that thrive, and a few that remind me I still have no idea what I am doing. A few other neighbors have started gardens since then. Maybe my situation inspired them. Maybe they just like fresh vegetables. Either way, the neighborhood looks better for it. The HOA is quieter now too. The new president seems reasonable. They focus on actual community issues instead of trying to police non-members or turn backyard gardens into legal emergencies. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had ripped out the garden when she first complained. It would have been easier in the short term. No county visits, no police calls. No certified letters, no cameras, but it also would have taught her that harassment works. And I was not willing to do that. It is my property. I am not in the HOA. The garden is legal. And I should be able to grow tomatoes in my own backyard without someone trying to turn it into a neighborhood crisis. The whole thing was exhausting, stupid, and completely avoidable. But at least it is over. The HOA president is gone. The garden is still here. And every summer, the tomatoes taste a little better because of it. The next one is a malicious compliance story. In my 20s, I spent a little over 5 years working for an oil and gas well service company. It was a 15 days on, 6 days off rotation. The first 4 years were at a small shop, roughly 7 hours from home. After that, I transferred to a much busier shop that was only a few hours from home. 5 years might not sound like much in the working world, but in that particular line of work, it was a long time. The job security was decent for oil field work, but the pay was marginal at best, so turnover was high. By the time I had been there 5 years, I was the most experienced hand in our shop. The new shop was definitely busier, and the money was way better. I also managed to have my days off matched up with the supervisor whose way of doing things meshed perfectly with mine. Everything else about that place was awful. My breaking point came when I was denied a day off with 2 days' notice to attend the funeral of a good friend who had passed away from health complications after a car accident. I was generally pretty understanding that in our line of work it could be difficult to balance manpower. But the day I had requested off passed with 4 other hands sitting around the shop doing make-work projects just to pass the time. Management could not be bothered to take a few minutes to see if they could make things work. It was easier to just say no. Up to that point, I had been extremely flexible whenever they had manpower shortages. I had probably worked over 100 of my scheduled days off and had only ever used 1 sick day. I thought a little reciprocity would have been nice, but that was when I made up my mind. I would fulfill my obligation to work 1 year at that shop so I would not have to pay back the $4,000 transfer bonus I had received. After that, it would be time to move on. I was only a few months away from that 1-year mark, so I started job shopping immediately. I quickly set my sights on a mine that we regularly did work for. It was close enough to home that I could commute daily. I made some inquiries with people I knew who worked there, and it sounded right up my alley. Not long after that, I updated my resume and sent it in. A few weeks later, I was driving back from a job and got a voicemail from Human Resources at the company I had applied to. I called back as soon as I had a spare minute and they asked me to come in for an interview 2 days later. My heart sank because I knew that was going to be a struggle. I talked with the Human Resources lady and asked if they had any other dates available. She explained that they only arranged 1 interview day once they had enough vacancies to justify doing orientation with a group of new hires. She said she could put me as first call for the next round, but she did not know when that would be, and it would probably also be on fairly short notice. In the end, I agreed to the interview appointment, even though I had no idea how I was going to make it work. I immediately went to the assistant manager to ask for time off since he was handling dispatch duties that week. I told him something important had come up at home and that I really needed to deal with it. Without hesitation, he said, "No, we have a full board this week and need you here. Whatever it is, we'll have to wait until your day's off." My first thought was that I would just call in sick and go to the interview anyway. The last thing I wanted was to worry about being fired from a job I no longer even wanted. Then I realized there might be another path forward. I went to the job board, and there it was, exactly what I needed. There was a potentially week-long job for the same company I was scheduled to interview with, and the job was set to start the next day. None of the jobs had been assigned to crews yet. I filled my supervisor in on the situation and my plan, and he was on board. We went to the assistant manager and offered to take that job. He was delighted to have us volunteer since not many crews wanted to be away from home for a week, mostly confined to a rig shack. Day 1 went smoothly and we were done by early afternoon. I used the supervisor's truck and went home to get interview-appropriate clothes. On day 2, we were running a little behind, but we just barely got the job set up and our tools deployed into the well with enough time for me to grab a quick shower and change clothes. Then I took the supervisor's truck over to the administration building for my interview. The next week, I got a call with a job offer and a start date 2 weeks out. The starting wage was definitely lower than what I was making, but they offered clearly defined progression. By year 2, I would easily match my current income, and by year 4, I would be well above it. The benefits were better and the schedule would give me twice as much time off. I went to give my manager my 2 weeks' notice. He asked where I was going and what I would be making. He was appalled that I would leave for such a low starting wage. Then he asked what it would take to keep me. I told him, when a person is willing to take a pay cut to leave, that ship obviously sailed a long time ago. The next one is an entitled people story. This is kind of a rant post. For context, my brother is 25 and he has been nosy, annoying, and difficult for most of my life. I had a lucky couple of years away from him when I was around 8 to 10, living in a neighboring country with my other brother and my father, but other than that, he has always been around. He is the type of person who does chores or tasks mostly so he can later say, "I am so tired. You are all so lazy." It never feels like he is doing things because the house needs to be maintained or because the task simply needs to be done. It feels like he does it so he can hold it over everyone's head. Most people would just do chores because they need to be done, but he acts like every small task makes him a martyr. At the same time, whenever he feels he has enough justification not to do anything, he uses that excuse fully. For example, we once had a minor money crisis and needed someone to work. He had worked in the past, but that time he was being very lazy. It was summer, there was no college, and the money was only needed until summer ended, so he would not have had to work during school. He claimed he was going to do graphic design, but he only mentioned it a handful of times and never showed any progress. That is just one example, but he still acts like he does the most around the house. He is also the type to try to convince all of us to watch a movie with him for family time, but he never considers whether it would actually be a good family movie. He has picked things with gore, which my mother hates, and even movies with really uncomfortable scenes. Basically, he is so stuck in his own head that he does not think about anyone else unless it makes him look better. Whenever he is in a bad mood, he spreads it around the house like a plague. My mother, father, grandmother, and mostly my other brother are spared, but because I am the youngest, I seem to get the worst of it. One time he gave me a black eye because I supposedly took too long to throw something in the trash. This is the shortened version, but at the time I was 14 and obviously could not fight a grown 23-year-old man. What happened was that I broke a cup. I had just woken up and turned on the PlayStation. He was already in a bad mood, gathered the broken glass, and gave me a piece to throw away. I was holding it and was lost in my own thoughts because I had just woken up. When he told me to throw it in the trash, I groggily hovered over the garbage for maybe 4 seconds before dropping it in. That was it. I was not taking 4 seconds per piece or doing anything dramatic. I just paused for a few seconds before throwing away one piece. He got angry and told me I had taken too long. I told him that even if I had, waiting 4 seconds for me to throw something in the trash was not important enough to get angry about. That just made him angrier. He kept pushing and insulting me, while I did not insult him once. Eventually, I decided I was not dealing with it and went to my room. He followed and started swinging. My other brother, who was 22 at the time, tried to stop him. The couch got knocked over, I ended up with a black eye, and he ended up with a bite mark on his arm because he had tried to put me in a chokehold. He only let go after I bit him. After all of that, he did not even feel sorry. Instead, he tried to get our other brother, the same one who had tried to stop the fight, to make me apologize to him. And yes, it felt great going to soccer practice the next day with a black eye and having to explain to my friends that I was not being hurt by my parents and had just fallen. Even now, he still gives me trouble. For example, today I was downloading something on the PlayStation. The download was taking a long time, so I turned off the television but left the PlayStation on. About an hour later, he unplugged the PlayStation from the power cord, which can damage it, especially during a download. I was not even that angry at first because I understood that he had a point about the television being off. All I said was, "Hey, the PlayStation was on." I was not yelling, but he immediately got defensive and gave me a whole speech about how I should always keep the television on if the PlayStation is on. Any attempt I made to explain just turned into him reminding me again not to forget. Another example happened when he came into the room to study. Technically, the room is kind of a second living room. It has 2 beds, a television, and air conditioning. I do not sleep there, but I use it often. He has a room basically to himself when we do not have guests. That room has a fan, good airflow from the window design, and a huge desk for studying, his laptop, and his big monitor. But no, he had to sit in the room I was already in, even though he rarely goes there except to eat or talk to my grandmother when she visits. My parents were both gone, and my other brother was gone too, so if anything happened, there was no one there to stop him. I felt like I just had to agree or stay quiet. It would be more frightening if he were still getting physical, but he has not done that since. Still, I get worried because the only reason it has not happened again is that we have not had a major argument since then. When he sat down at the much smaller desk, which only had my laptop and a lot less room than his own desk, I was playing on the PlayStation. If I tried to say anything about him using that room, he would say he was only there so our grandmother was not alone, even though she was asleep. When he stopped studying, I went to use the laptop and was about to move his things to his room. Before I could do anything, he yelled, "Stop! I will put the things away." Then he angrily got up with a moody expression and picked up his stuff. After that, he launched into a speech about how I walk like a gorilla. He even acted it out for several seconds, swinging his arms around, then started talking about how there was a small table behind the bigger table with a cup of water on it. According to him, he somehow knew I was going to slam the study table and knock the cup over. He demonstrated that too. Then he claimed I put things on that table myself, but tell him he cannot. Meanwhile, I was just standing there speechless because I had not said anything. I told him I only put things there when I am eating and that I move them afterward. He laughed and gave me another angry speech about how I supposedly do not do that, how I am a hypocrite, and how I talk too much. Then he acted like all he had done was help me by warning me not to knock the cup over. He started complaining that nobody ever respects him when he helps us, as if he had not just called me a gorilla and lectured me for no reason. He is constantly like this. If he feels he has the right to tell someone not to do something, he jumps at the chance. He loves basking in the glory of warning someone to be careful, or telling someone to turn off one light because of electricity, like he is the head of a homeowners association. He is also a huge self-victimizer. For example, when he talked to my parents about work after college, my father, who has over 50 years of experience and is now mostly retired in the same career my brother studied for, told him he would probably have to move to another country. In our country, most engineering jobs are handled by the government, and the field is extremely difficult to break into. My brother agreed that the job market was difficult, but when my father pointed out the obvious issues, including that he might have no work, that finding a job would be very hard, that most jobs in that career would already be filled, and that he might make little to no money at first, my brother stormed out of the room and called them incompetent. I will thank God for the day he finally moves out, and if he does not move out, then when my other brother does, I am going to try to go with him. The next one is an entitled parent's story. For some backstory, I was visiting an old friend of mine. Before the visit, I had told her about some dreams I had been having and asked her if she thought I might be trans. Before that, I had not really thought about it much, but later I realized that this is who I am. She was incredibly supportive, to the point that I am still shocked by it, so when I went to visit her, we talked about it more, and she had me try on different clothes, makeup, and wigs. I am not posting pictures, so please do not ask for them. We spent hours like that until her mom said we were going out for dinner. My friend and I saw this as the perfect opportunity for me to go outside as a girl for the first time. So I wore a casual dress, tights, flats, a rainbow wig that definitely looked like a wig, and some makeup, mostly lipstick and blush for anyone curious. We all went out to eat at the manor house of the caravan park we visit regularly. Since it was my first time presenting as a girl in public, we thought it would be best to go somewhere familiar. It was me, my friend, her parents, and her brother. We sat down and ordered. My friend's mom and her husband went outside for a smoke, and my friend's brother went to the arcade. My friend and I were just having our usual girl talk when a little girl came up to us. She said, "Hi, I love your hair." I said, "Thanks, I am pretty fond of it too." Then she asked, "Can I feel it?" I was a bit cautious, but I said, "Okay, but please be gentle." She felt it, then asked, "Is this a wig?" My friend said, "Yes, it is a wig and it belongs to her. Please leave it alone." The little girl said, "It is pretty though, I want it." I said, "Sorry, but no. If you want one, ask your mother." Then she left. My friend looked at me and said, "That was odd. Are you okay, Laura?" Laura is the female name we decided I would go by, since my original name is Liam. I said, "I am fine. I am just glad that is over." Then the girl's mother arrived. She looked like she was in her mid-30s, and she immediately gave off entitled parent energy. She said, "Excuse me, miss." Since I was not used to being addressed as a girl, I hesitated and said, "Are you talking to me?" She snapped, "Who else? My daughter told me you will not give her your wig." I said, "That is true. I told her she could talk to you if she wanted one." She said, "And that is why I am here. I want you to give my daughter your wig." I said, "That is not what I meant. My answer is still no." The little girl whined, "But Mummy, I want it." The mother said, "I was not asking you, I am telling you. Give my daughter your wig." Right then our food arrived. By chance it was brought over by a waiter who personally knew both me and my friend's family. He said, "Here's your food, ladies." The entitled mother immediately said, "That woman took my daughter's wig, tell her to give it back." Since my voice had not changed, the waiter recognized me. I said, "Hi, it has been a while, do you have time to talk after your shift?" My friend had my back and quickly texted the waiter what was going on. He looked at his phone, understood the situation, and said, "Yes, sounds good." The entitled mother snapped, "Excuse me, I told you to do something." The waiter said, "Ma'am, that is not your daughter's wig. I watched them walk in, and I have known Laura for years. She came in wearing that wig. Please leave her alone, or I will call security." I could tell he had a bit of difficulty saying it, but he stood firm. The entitled mother said, "No, I am not leaving until I get that wig." So the waiter called security. The security guard came over and said, "Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to leave." Before he could finish, the little girl grabbed my wig from behind me and pulled it off. I said, "What the hell?" The mother looked shocked and shouted, "You are a guy?" I stood up and said, "Ma'am, this could have all been avoided if you had just..." Before I could finish, she threw her purse at me and it hurt badly. I have no idea what was in that thing. I ended up on the floor trying to get up, and then she kicked me in the face, got on top of me, and started hitting me. Security pulled her away while she screamed hateful insults at me. I heard her yell something about me being transgender and going to hell. As I was getting up, the security guard returned my wig to me, and the waiter came back with an ice pack. That was when the security guard recognized me too, and I explained what had happened. He was very kind and understanding. My friend's mom and her husband came back and saw me with the ice pack. My friend and I told them what had happened. After they checked that I was okay, we ate our food and eventually managed to laugh about it. Aside from that incident, the night was amazing. I truly loved the feminine side of myself. Some of the people who witnessed what happened even came up to me afterward and complimented me for being myself, but my friend and I like to joke that they just really loved my hair. Anyway, thank you for watching.